are expected to work more than the standard industry professional. The standard industry professional is expected to work 40 hours a week in order to be considered full-time. However, full-time college students are expected to put in more than 40 hours a week in order to adhere to college standards. So this presents an issue. Poor work-life balance is plaguing the college student. But we first need to understand how this poor work-life balance is coming about, what students are actually having to use their day for, and what effect this is having on students. Then we can start to look at solutions that'll help us resolve this poor work-life balance that students may have. So first, a full-time student is considered a student who is taking 12 to 18 credit hours. But when you look at the max of 18 credit hours, then we have to look at that the standard is that students will be required to put in 2 extra hours, or 2 hours outside of the classroom for every hour that they are inside of the classroom. This means outside of the class, they're expected to work 36 hours. But when you add that into the 18 hours that they're expected to be inside the classroom, students are being asked to put in 54 hours a week on schooling and on education. This means when you take the 54 hours divided by 5 days a week that a standard industry professional would be required to work, this leaves you with only 13.2 hours left in a college student's day. But college students are expected to put in a lot more. So when we take JUUL, for example, over 50% of the JUUL population are student athletes. So not only do we have to consider practices and workouts that these students have to put in, but also the extra time that games afford them too. Additionally, 24.4% of students are fully financially responsible, according to Ladders, for paying for their college education. That means that 25% of students are required to work full-time jobs. 40% of undergraduate students work at least 30 hours a week, according to The Atlantic. And this doesn't include any extracurricular activities that other students are doing outside of sports. Especially when we're taking the JUUL community into account, we are really expected as students to be involved in multiple different activities and extracurricular work. And especially jobs look for students who have multiple extracurricular activities in their repertoire when hiring and on resumes. So when we look at this graph here, it's basically putting in perspective of what I just laid out for you. It is completely mapping out a student's typical day. In order to have a healthy sleep amount for students our age, they're required 8.6 hours of sleep, 4 hours for extracurricular activities and sports, and 3.3 hours of educational activities are allotted. Obviously, this isn't exactly how this looks, or exactly how maybe my numbers mapped out, but it is very similar and very close and can be looked at as a good guide. We also have to remember too that students' mental health is often being neglected in order to accommodate for these educational standards in order to succeed in the educational world. Students have reported 6 or more stressful life events, and 1 in 5 students have reported thoughts of suicide, according to a Harvard study. When looking at this, the 6 or more stressful life events is super important to consider because students aren't being able to manage these life events because they're being too focused on schoolwork, in addition to the other things that they're having to do. We didn't even take into account in the other graph the fact that the students are having to cook for themselves, clean for themselves, do laundry, and other just basic life necessities. Not all hope is lost though. There is a lot of things that we can do in order to remedy the fact and promote a better work-life balance in college students. First, alter the expectations of the students and require them to work 40 hours a week total inside the classroom and out. Of course, there's going to be those weeks where you have to work more if there's a big test or a big paper coming up. However, take those in-class hours to provide students to work on different assignments. In addition to that, offer in-class time to work on assignments. So cut down the outside classwork, but promote more in-class work. Additionally, cut out the unnecessary assignments. There are a lot of assignments that are considered busy work for students in order to increase points of the class total points. These assignments aren't always needed, and it can really cut down on the total amount of hours spent outside of the classroom and really promote that 40 hours a week that would be considered of a standard industry professional. Lastly, is for professors to really be understanding of students and their life outside of school. There's a lot of things that happen outside of school in a student's life, especially for those incoming freshmen coming into college. They're really trying to manage being on their own for the very first time, and they're having to manage different life events. So be understanding when something comes up or students need extra time in their day to manage their schoolwork. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.